The ranch had been quiet for so long that Eli Turner sometimes wondered if sound itself avoided the place. Wind moved through the dry grass, boards creaked under the sun, and cattle lowed in the distance. But human voices had been absent for years. Since his wife's death, Eli had learned to live without conversation, without company, and without questions. Days passed in steady repetition: wake before dawn, tend the herd, repair what time and weather broke, and sit alone on the porch as the sky darkened. He told himself he preferred it that way. That evening, the desert sunset burned low and red, casting long shadows across the yard. Eli was washing his hands at the outdoor pump when he heard it. A sound so unexpected, he thought he imagined it. A knock, not the wind, not a loose board. A knock on his front door. His heart thudded as he stared at the house, uneasy and uncertain. No one ever came out here. He approached slowly and opened the door just enough to look outside. 3 women stood on the porch. Their clothes were dusty, their faces drawn with exhaustion, yet there was a quiet strength in the way they carried themselves. Dark eyes met his with a mixture of caution and urgency. One of them, older than the others, stepped forward, her hands visible to show she meant no harm. "We're sorry to bother you," she said softly. "We've been walking for hours. Every place we asked turned us away. We just need somewhere safe for the night." Eli didn't answer right away. He hadn't spoken to a woman in years, and now 3 stood before him asking for shelter. He noticed the way the youngest clutched her coat, the way another scanned the land as if expecting danger to rise from the darkness. These weren't drifters looking for trouble. They were scared. His instincts warned him of risk, but something deeper, something he thought had died long ago, pulled at him. He remembered how it felt to need help and find none. The silence behind him suddenly felt heavier than the uncertainty before him. Without fully understanding why, Eli opened the door wider and stepped aside. "You can stay," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Just for the night." "Storm's coming!" Relief washed over their faces. As they stepped inside, bringing the chill of the desert with them, Eli realized the ranch was no longer empty. For the first time in years, the quiet was broken, not by noise, but by presence. And though he didn't know it yet, that single knock had ended one life and begun another. Morning arrived, with the smell of rain-soaked earth and the unfamiliar sound of movement inside the house. Eli woke before sunrise out of habit, then lay still, confused, as soft footsteps crossed the wooden floor. It took a moment to remember why his home felt different. The women were still here. He rose, pulled on his jacket, and stepped into the kitchen to find them quietly helping themselves, careful not to intrude. Coffee was brewing, the fire had been fed, and the tension he'd expected was replaced by an uneasy calm. Outside, clouds hung low over the land, and by midday the rain returned hard and steady, turning the yard into thick mud. With nowhere else to go, they remained indoors, gathered near the fireplace as the wind rattled the windows. Silence lingered at first, but it was no longer empty. It was waiting. Eventually, the youngest woman spoke, thanking Eli again for letting them stay. Her voice carried gratitude mixed with fear, as if she worried even now that the shelter might be taken away. Slowly, the truth came out. They were Apache, traveling together after leaving land that no longer felt safe. Powerful men had decided their presence was inconvenient, and pressure had turned into threats. Every door they knocked on had been shut in their faces once their story became known. By the time they reached Eli's ranch, they were exhausted and nearly out of hope. Eli listened, saying little, but every word settled heavily in his chest. He knew what it meant to be pushed aside, to feel invisible. When the storm eased, he offered them food and told them they could stay a few more days. It surprised him how natural the words felt. He even asked if they could help with small tasks around the ranch, more to give them purpose than to lighten his workload. Days blended together as the rain cleared and the sun returned. The women worked hard, mending fences, tending horses, and moving across the land as if they understood it. In the evenings, they sat near the fire, sharing stories from their past, songs learned from elders, memories of wide skies and family gatherings. Eli found himself drawn into the circle, speaking of his wife for the first time in years, of regrets he'd buried beneath routine. Laughter began to live in the house, surprising all of them. Yet beneath the warmth, unease remained. The women watched the horizon carefully, and Eli sensed their fear hadn't vanished. It had only paused. He knew then that offering shelter meant more than opening a door. Whatever followed, he had already crossed a line he could never return from, and he didn't regret it. The first sign of trouble came with the sound of engines, cutting through the afternoon air. Eli was repairing a fence when he saw dust rising in the distance, drifting toward the ranch like an approaching storm. 3 trucks rolled in and stopped near the house, their presence loud and deliberate. The women noticed immediately. Their bodies stiffened and fear flashed across their faces. They had been found. Eli felt the old instinct to step back, to let the problem pass by him, but that instinct no longer ruled him. He walked toward the house, standing firmly between the trucks and the women as the doors swung open. The men who stepped out carried confidence sharpened by entitlement. They spoke as if the land already belonged to them, as if the people standing on it did not. They demanded the women come with them, claiming authority that sounded thin when spoken aloud. Eli answered calmly, his voice steady despite the tension tightening his chest. He told them this was his property and that no one would be taken by force. The men laughed at first, then grew irritated when he didn't move aside. What followed was not violence, but confrontation rooted in resolve. Eli had already contacted the sheriff days earlier, trusting his instincts rather than ignoring them. He told the men that legal eyes were watching now, that tribal representatives were involved, and that threats carried consequences. The women stood beside him, no longer hiding, their presence quiet but unyielding. The standoff stretched until authority arrived, and with it, truth. Papers were examined, accusations questioned, and confidence began to crack. The men retreated, their power weakened by exposure and resistance. Dust swallowed their trucks as they left, taking the threat with them. When the ranch grew quiet again, the silence felt different than before. It was earned. The women sat with Eli on the porch as the sun dipped low, the air heavy with relief and uncertainty. They spoke of moving on, of finishing the journey they had begun. Eli listened without interrupting, knowing he had no right to ask them to stay. In the end, the choice was theirs. They decided together that the ranch was more than a hiding place. It was a chance to rebuild. Eli offered partnership, not protection, and respect, not ownership. Work was shared. Decisions were shared. Trust grew slowly like grass after rain. The land changed with them. Fences stood stronger, horses ran freer, and the house filled with voices and purpose. Eli still watched the sunset each night, but he no longer faced it alone. What began as a knock at the door had become a turning point, not just for those who sought shelter, but for the man who finally opened his life again.